That was the first time my dad ever said sorry. Then I learned why. I remember the exact moment. It was raining lightly, and the house was quieter than usual. My dad stood in the doorway of my room, shoulders slightly hunched, like he was carrying something heavy. Then, out of nowhere, he said it. "I'm sorry." Just 2 words. But to me, it felt like the world had stopped spinning for a second. He had never said that before. Not once in my entire life. Not when we argued, not during hard times, not even when I knew he was wrong. And hearing it now, so unexpectedly, left me completely frozen. Growing up, my dad was the type of man who believed silence was strength. He worked long hours, rarely showed emotion, and held this tough, unbreakable image. I used to think he didn't care. Or maybe he just didn't know how to care in the way I needed him to. Our relationship wasn't bad, just distant. Cold, even. Like there was this invisible wall between us that neither of us wanted to break first. So when he finally said sorry, I didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to ask, for what? But I could tell something was different. His voice cracked a little, and he didn't look me in the eye. That's when I knew, this wasn't about a small mistake. This was something bigger. Something deeper. And as much as I wanted to hear the truth, a part of me was scared to know what had finally pushed him to say those words. What happened next changed the way I saw my dad forever. But before I get into that, let me take you back to where this all began. Because to understand that moment, you need to know the story behind it. It started when I was around 10. My dad was always there, but not really there, you know? He provided for us, made sure the bills were paid, the fridge was full, and the lights stayed on. But emotionally, he kept his distance. I remember watching other kids with their dads at school events, laughing and hugging, and I used to wonder if mine even liked being a dad. He didn't come to games or ask how my day went. Our conversations were short, mostly about homework or chores. And if I ever messed up, there was silence, or worse, that disappointed look that said everything without saying anything at all. My mom tried to fill the gap, always telling me, he loves you, he just doesn't know how to show it. I used to nod like I believed her, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. Over the years, I stopped trying to connect. I figured maybe he was just one of those people who didn't know how to be close. So, I built my own wall. We coexisted like 2 strangers in the same house, polite but distant. But then, things slowly started to shift. It began with little things, him asking if I wanted help fixing my bike, offering to drop me off at school instead of just tossing me the keys. I thought maybe he was just trying to make up for lost time. Or maybe he finally realized how far apart we'd grown. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to ruin whatever progress we were making. Still, there were signs that something wasn't right. He seemed distracted. Tired, even when he hadn't worked a long day. He'd stand in the hallway sometimes, just staring at old photos on the wall. I caught him doing that once, his eyes locked on a picture of us when I was a baby. I didn't say anything, but the way he looked at it gave me chills. Like he was holding on to something he didn't know how to let go of. I started noticing more of those quiet moments. Times when he looked like he wanted to talk, but couldn't. Like he was carrying this secret he was afraid to let out. And that's when I started to wonder, what if his apology wasn't about me? What if it was about something else, something from his past that he never meant for me to find out? And the truth? It was closer than I ever imagined. It wasn't long after that I found the letter. It was tucked inside an old book on the shelf in the garage, one of those places my dad always told me not to mess with. I wasn't snooping, I was just looking for a charger I'd left in there. The book looked like it hadn't been touched in years, and when it slipped from the shelf and hit the ground, the folded paper fell out. I wish I could say I hesitated, but I didn't. Something about it just pulled me in. The handwriting was his. I recognized the way he wrote his capital GS and the way he looped his YS. But the letter wasn't addressed to me. It was written to someone named Michael. And the first line read, "I'm sorry I wasn't there that night." My heart started racing. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. The tone was heavy, full of guilt and regret. There were things in it I didn't understand, mentions of a hospital, a phone that went unanswered, and a decision he said he'd never forgive himself for. Who was Michael? And what happened that night? The way my dad wrote it, it sounded like he'd failed someone when it mattered most. I put the letter back where I found it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like a puzzle piece I didn't know I was missing. And once I had it, everything else around me started to feel different, like there was a whole side to my dad I never knew existed. I started asking quiet questions. Not to him, at least not yet, but to my mom, my aunt, even my grandma when she visited. I dropped little hints. Most of them brushed it off, but I noticed their eyes shift or their tone change whenever I mentioned anything about my dad's past. There was a silence that felt deliberate, like everyone had agreed never to speak about whatever happened. At the same time, my dad grew even more distant. He seemed to notice my shift, like he could feel me getting closer to something he wasn't ready to share. One night, I heard him talking on the phone in the backyard. His voice was low, but I caught just enough. He said my name. Then he said, "He's going to find out." After I heard him say those words, "He's going to find out," my stomach dropped. I stayed by the window, hiding behind the curtain, holding my breath like I was doing something wrong. But at that point, I wasn't sure what I was more afraid of, what he was hiding, or what it would mean when I finally uncovered it. That night, he came back inside and acted completely normal. Asked if I'd eaten, even offered to cook something. It felt fake. Forced. Like he was trying to keep things from cracking before I could see through them. That's when I started digging deeper. I went back to the garage the next day and pulled the book out again, hoping there was more. And there was. Taped inside the back cover was a photo, slightly faded, but clear enough. Two boys, standing next to each other in a hospital hallway. One of them was definitely my dad, just much younger. The other kid, Michael, I assumed, was smiling, but something about his eyes looked tired. Like he'd seen too much for someone his age. On the back of the photo, in the same handwriting, it said, St. Mary's, 1991. Last good day. I didn't know what St. Mary's was, so I looked it up. There was a children's hospital by that name in a city about 2 hours from where we live. That's when everything started to click, or at least, started to shake loose. I started wondering if maybe my dad had a brother, or a best friend, someone who had gone through something terrible. Maybe he'd been there when it happened. Or maybe he hadn't, and that's what haunted him. For days, I kept acting normal around him, but I couldn't stop noticing things. He avoided certain dates. Would flinch a little if the news mentioned hospitals or accidents. Once, while we were watching TV, a scene came on with flashing ambulance lights, and he suddenly got up and left the room. No explanation. Just gone. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. One evening, my mom and I were washing dishes, and I brought up the name, Michael. I said it casually, just to see her reaction. She froze. Her hands stopped moving. She stared at the sink like she'd forgotten what she was doing. Then she quietly said, "You should ask your dad." Later that night, I finally did. I asked him straight out, "Who's Michael?" At first, he pretended not to hear me. Then he tried to change the subject. But when I repeated it, his whole expression changed. His eyes didn't get angry. They got sad. Tired. Like he'd been waiting for this moment, dreading it. He sat down on the edge of the couch and stared at the floor for what felt like forever. Then he whispered, "I thought I had more time before this came up." I could feel my heart pounding. I didn't say anything. I just waited. And that's when he looked up at me and said, "There's something I need to tell you. But once I do, things won't ever be the same again." I didn't know what to say. My dad just sat there, still as stone, like he was waiting for me to give him permission. So I nodded. Just once. That was enough. He took a deep breath and started talking, but not the way I expected. He didn't jump straight to the explanation. Instead, he asked me a question. "Have you ever wondered why we never visit my side of the family?" That hit me. I had, actually. As a kid, I'd ask about uncles or cousins, and he'd always brush it off. They live far, or we're not that close. Over time, I stopped asking. I figured some families just aren't big on reunions. But now, hearing him say it out loud, I realized it wasn't about distance. It never was. Then he told me about Michael. His younger brother. Not just a sibling, but his best friend growing up. They did everything together, same school, same bedroom, even the same bike at one point. My dad said they were inseparable, right up until their teenage years. That's when things started changing. Michael got sick. Something rare. Something the doctors didn't catch in time. And one night, it got bad. My dad was supposed to be there. He had promised he'd stay home, promised their mom he'd keep an eye on him. But he didn't. That night, my dad snuck out. Just for a few hours. A party. Friends. Just to feel normal, he said. When he came back, the ambulance was already there. Michael didn't make it. He paused then. His voice cracked. I could see the weight of that memory written all over his face. But before I could say anything, he added something that changed everything. "I wasn't alone that night," he said. "And the person I was with wasn't just a friend." My heart stopped. I could tell this part of the story was different. He looked nervous now. Not just sad, scared. Like he wasn't sure how I'd react. That's when he finally said her name. Emily. I froze. Emily was my mom's sister. My aunt. Someone who, up until now, I thought only had a distant connection to our family. We never saw her much. She'd visit now and then, birthdays or holidays, but there was always tension in the room when she did. I'd never understood it, until now. My dad and Emily had a history. One my mom knew about. One they had all kept buried for years. That night, when Michael needed him most, my dad was with Emily. And what made it worse? Emily was the one who had called him to come over. She didn't know Michael was sick. But still, That choice changed everything. Now the guilt wasn't just about what happened. It was about what could have been prevented. What he chose over his own brother. And worse, how it shattered his family from the inside out. But there was still more. I could see it in his eyes. Something even deeper, something he hadn't said yet. And whatever it was, I had the feeling it was going to change everything I thought I knew about my family. He looked like he was carrying the weight of the entire past on his shoulders. His voice dropped even lower when he said, that night, Michael didn't just pass away. He woke up before the ambulance came. He was scared. He called out for me. I felt a lump rise in my throat. My dad's hands were shaking now. Mom told me later that he tried to crawl out of bed. Tried to get to the phone. But he couldn't. He was too weak. His voice broke completely. And I wasn't there. I could have helped him. I should have. The room felt heavy. My dad sat there with tears in his eyes, and I'd never seen him cry before. Not once. I didn't know what to feel, anger, shock, sadness, all of it was spinning in my head. The apology made sense now. So did all the quiet moments, the distance, the way he avoided certain dates and names. He wasn't cold. He was haunted. But just when I thought I understood the full story, he said something that hit even harder. There's one more thing, he said, looking me straight in the eye. Michael wasn't just my brother. He was your uncle, and maybe more than that. I frowned. What do you mean? He hesitated, then finally said, we found out later that Emily was pregnant. A few months after that night. She disappeared for a while, and when she came back, she wasn't the same. No one really talked about it, but your mom, she had suspicions. I froze. Are you saying? He nodded slowly. You might have a cousin you've never met. Or a half-brother. Somewhere out there. That twist hit me harder than anything else. All this time, I thought the story was about a mistake, a death, a hidden past. But now, it had turned into something else entirely, unfinished family ties, a missing piece of who I was. The apology wasn't just about regret. It was a warning. Because now, I had a choice, to leave the past buried like they all had tried to, or to start digging into what came next. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was spinning with everything my dad had told me. The truth about Michael. About Emily. About the possibility that I had a brother, or cousin, somewhere out there, living a life completely separate from ours, probably not even knowing who I was. For the first time, I understood why my dad had stayed silent for so long. It wasn't just guilt, it was fear. Fear of what the truth could break apart. The next morning, things felt different between us. Not lighter, exactly, but clearer. He didn't have to say anything else. Just the way he looked at me, like he wasn't hiding anymore, was enough. We both knew that everything had changed. And strangely, I didn't feel angry. I felt closer to him than I ever had. Because now, I knew the real story behind the silence. Behind the distance. Behind that one word he'd never said until recently, sorry. Over the next few weeks, I started asking my mom more questions. She was quiet at first, unsure how much to share. But when I told her everything Dad had said, she finally opened up. She confirmed what I already suspected. There had been a child. Emily had left town quietly after Michael's death and came back months later without ever explaining what happened. No one in the family talked about it. It was like the unspoken rule, move forward, forget the pain, protect what's left. But I couldn't let it go. I started doing my own digging. Old records, social media, anything that could lead me to the missing piece. I haven't found him, yet. But something tells me I will. And when I do, it won't be about confronting the past. It'll be about understanding it. This whole journey started with something so small, a simple apology. But it opened a door to everything my dad never said. It taught me that sometimes the strongest people are the ones carrying the heaviest regrets. And sometimes, healing doesn't begin with answers, it begins with the courage to ask the hard questions. That was the first time my dad ever said sorry. And now, I finally understand why.